Hi, folks. I'm Herb Stevenson, and joining us today is Lisa Kayser. She's stepping in to assist us. Saadeo Ramarak has been ill. He's not been feeling well, so rather than postponing any more recordings, we decided to move forward, and we send our best to Saadeo. Today, on Natural Passages Revealing the Unmarked Doors of Life, we're going to talk about listening as a form of presence. And so Lisa and I are going to have a conversation about it. And in the process, I want to set the tone that the idea of listening as a form of presence is it can lead to the intimate edge in any relationship or any situation. So with that, Lisa, welcome. And I look forward to a nice conversation today.
Well, me too. I'm pretty curious to how this is going to go.
Okay. So, as a prelude to this, I'd like to say a few things. When I look at presence, as we've been doing in this podcast, the question comes is how does presence show up in our lives? So, if I'm more present, then it's likely not only am I paying more attention, but I'm also in some other activities that are on our daily basis. Is I'm also, example, listening. So, as a background to that, it's saying that presence requires, just as listening requires, for us to be able to focus conscious awareness in the moment, uh, be attentive to what we're attending to. When I say that, is am I attending to a person? And that'll become clearer as we go through shortly, because Lisa's going to kind of guide us through the 5 types of listening. It ends up presence as well as listening requires that we have a relationship with ourselves and others. There's an acceptance, a non-judgmental aspect of what is happening in the moment. And we basically try to have a clear mind. And I'm going to try to provide for us a series of examples to go through this process and go from there. So, Lisa, are there any comments that you would like to make?
No, but I already have a curiosity how I'm going to do this. Keep listening and not think about what I'm going to ask you.
That's,
So,
that's perfectly normal.
right?
That's fine. That's fine.
So, do you want me to start with the first of the common types of listening?
Yeah, we could start there.
Not listening?
Yeah. Well, not listening is actually, if you want to make it into a humorous part, it's almost like an epidemic.
Hmm.
We do not pay attention very well, and therefore we do not listen. 90% of relationships struggle because the other person says, I'm not paying attention. So, in other words, sounds occurring, but we're really not receiving anything into our focus or our attention. So, common examples of that, people multitask all the time. Study after study says multitasking doesn't work. You not only not do either task well, you do it less. It creates mediocrity. So there's this illusion that I can listen and do something else, which is just the opposite. So people ask me, well, how do you address that? And I said, you'd be surprised the quality of your relationship changes if you do one simple thing. If somebody comes in and focuses, wants your attention, wants to interrupt you, there's nothing wrong with simply pausing and saying, I need to finish this. Or if you're at a place that you can pause, you pause, but you turn away, for example, a computer or TV, and you look directly at that person. And as soon as you do that and you focus your attention, whatever you're listening kicks in, and whatever needs to be addressed can be addressed. The most common place that when I work with clients is this happens at work is constantly interruptions. And I ask them to try this instead of multitasking or interrupting yourself in an inappropriate way. Set a boundary. As soon as I finish this, I'll give you my undivided attention, and then give them undivided attention. that changes most frustrations and it stops some of the things that's commonly happen because there'll be conversations, for example, this often happens in meetings where somebody is trying to talk and they're texting. You can't do both. Well, you could do both, but you can't do them well. And it's taking your attention away, your attentiveness away. And so basically it's saying it, you're not listening. And that's really an issue because a lot of people get upset when I say this, but what it basically is saying is this. As an existential, my experience of existing, coexisting with you in a moment, if I'm not listening, I'm indicating that you're not important enough for me to treat you as if you exist or that you deserve to be heard. And that's why it bothers people. Because existentially, you feel it inside yourself. You're saying, as you're ignoring me or you've pulled yourself away from me. And the best example that I have about to support that is one of the things that some people are very good at is the silent treatment. The silent treatment, those who use it very effectively recognize it's not lack of noise, it's the lack of connectivity to that other person. So they feel abandoned. And if anybody's felt shunning, knows that. And so we do a variation of that by not listening, by just not attending to the person in the moment. And that's why I refer to it as almost epidemic, because the minute that you turn and start focusing on that person and actually attend to them, they feel heard, feel seen, whatever the need that led to the conversation usually is addressed very quickly. So that's why I say not listening is actually a major issue. And people wonder why energetically. If they look at it energetically, like I just said, it's basically saying, you don't deserve to be attended to.
Is there a lack of presence if you start to attend to something else instead of listening? Are you losing some of your presence when you do that?
Yes, because your presence goes to whatever you're attending to. And that's been the issue that as societally, socially, we've created problems for ourselves. Um, we don't really realize where we focus our attention is our presence. And so if I'm focusing on just being fully present here, sitting with you and having a conversation, I don't have anything going on in the back of my mind. I'm just having this conversation. If I redirect my energy, I notice something else is happening and I move that energy away. We notice that. It's a sensing. Uh, and I believe existentially, my sense of existence is everybody actually has a desire to be seen and heard, which is another way of saying to be validated on a regular basis. I'm being validated in paying attention to another person. I've had situations that very similar to that.
So what you just did right now by looking away from me and picking up your phone and looking at something is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, because there was I shifted my attention. My phone has it's the only way it bypasses that do not disturb is my wife. She has a priority code, so she's allowed to go through. And I forgot to shut it off. And then I'm not wanting to sit here and let it disturb the conversation. But it's a good example because I just redirected all of my attention away from the conversation. Anybody listening to us felt the disruption.
Mm-hmm.
And we began to realize that literally what we attend to makes the difference. So it's I'll give you an example that ties to this when I say not listening is an epidemic, and it ties to what you just asked me. Most people, about 15 to 20% into a conversation, will make a decision point of thinking about how I'm going to respond to you. If I just sit there and do nothing but focus on attending to what is being said, validate or verify what they have said, and the the chances of us actually completing a conversation that feels satisfactory or satisfying is much higher. And so we've become, which you're leading me into, the second area of listening, which is reactionary or rebuttal. In that one, we don't really hear and acknowledge what the person said. We begin to listen to what's in our head.
Right.
And that's what creates a lot of frustration in relationships. The person will frequently say is you're not listening. Yes, I am. No, you're not. You're not listening. You're thinking about something else, or you're thinking about what you're going to say to rebut me. And I'm not really interested in a rebuttal. What I'm interested in is a conversation. So it's the most common level that most people have gotten because I think society does that. Is we especially in the U.S. we like to think you have to have an answer, or you have to have an opinion, or it has to be my way is the right way, or your way is the wrong way. It doesn't really matter. We're not really listening for interesting content and to be able to communicate with each other. And so reactionary listening is one of the most common difficult points because you really don't hear and acknowledge the person. Instead, you're jumping to a conclusion that's based on something inside your head instead of checking out the conversation, saying okay, I understood. Is this what you were saying? And then based on that, I can respond. I might rebut, so to speak, what is something said, but I didn't do it before I made sure I understood what was being said.
Yeah, for me, it's more of like, I want to add to this. I want to add to what you're saying then, instead of rebuttal. It's more of I want you to know I understand, or I'm getting it or something. And then sometimes I stop myself and I blurt because I'm going to forget it. So that I have to let it forget it so I can stay in conversation.
Good example. So, reactionary is probably our biggest issue. We felt the other side of similar to what you just said, that you just triggered a thought in listening to you, is that part of do I interrupt or not? And the interruption is, if you interrupt, saying is, I need to interrupt because I want to make sure I understood you, or there's something I need to say in relation to what you just said so that I can go forward and hear you. So it's listening and adjusting to your urges, but doing it in such a way that tries to keep the conversation going forward. That makes sense.
Yes. Okay. And there is something about interrupting that's still, I dance with.
Well, most people do. You either have the person who doesn't care about interrupting and just does it because they think what they have to say is more important, which doesn't work very well. And the others who don't, because some of us were raised, you're to be seen but not heard. So you're not supposed to say anything, or you're not supposed to interrupt. But there is a way to interrupt it in a situation like this, is to just for clarity. So ask a question about, is this what you meant? And that furthers the conversation. I've been in situations where I thought I understood. I said, I want to check this out. Is this what you're saying? And they say, well, no, that's not what I'm saying. And I said, would you elaborate in a different way? And then we get back on track.
Boom.
The thrust of listening is the goal is constantly seeking to have a common understanding. And if we do that, what ends up happening is our presence goes up and our relationship is improved. So the third one is observational listening. Some people call it factual. It's basically where I'm attentive and I'm listening for details, but I'm also energetically seeking a potential connection to the past, present, and future. So I'm trying to understand energetically how do these facts and features. So it's not like I'm listening for regurgitation. I'm listening for observation and understanding. So facts are understood within the collective as well as the individual's perceptions. And listening to respectfully experienced by hearing through one set of senses, my senses, to understand the person or situation before I come to a conclusion. Now, this can be really beneficial for us because when we do it from that point of view is I'm doing observing and verifying so for my own understanding. And if I'm doing that as I move forward, what ends up happening is the person feels, this is when they start having the experience of feeling heard. I'll give you, this sounds like a silly example, but I'll give you an example. I was on an airplane flying once, and I was in that place where I was just extremely present. And I actually was listening to, it tells my age, this is in the days where the attendants were explaining everything and talking about all the safety features. So it's no longer like it is today where it's all video. And I got the attention of the flight attendant who recognized I literally was listening and paying attention to her and making eye contact. And later she came back and she said, I've been flying 20 years. I've never experienced what I experienced there. And I said, what was that? She says, I experienced being heard and I felt validated as a person. And it can be that simple. If you're present, just attending to them with nothing else, it makes a difference. So one of the things that I've done, I've talked about this in the prior podcast, is you make eye contact, soft eye contact before you start a conversation. The tendency is the person will settle in and feel that you're present, therefore validated, and the conversation goes better. And I've done that with clients, and I've done that, have clients do that with their children. Changes the relationship with the children. Children now suddenly feel validated, they feel seen, they feel heard. It shifts everything. That makes sense.
Yes, it does. In fact, it's like they can almost see into my soul when I'm talking to them because they're really present behind their eyes.
Right.
Feels different.
And they're doing that because you invited them into you. The fourth level is engaged, or what's often called empathic listening. I like to say engaged because if I'm engaged, I'm energetically connected. So from a point of view of presence, in a prior podcast, we've talked about presence is contagious. So if I'm fully present with you, the chances of you relaxing energetically inside yourself, or if you wish to say emotionally, but from my perspective, presence is pure energy. A sense of the other person becomes clearer, but you become clearer. And as an engaged listening, it's like I'm hearing through the words. And when we have those moments, oftentimes we begin to feel like I'm nearing the intimate edge. Something is happening energetically between the two of us where we're meeting, it's 1 + 1 = 3. It's like you're you, I'm me, and there's a we now that's forming because this sense of presence, which we call the intimate edge, or art math would call heart coherence, is because energetically there's a resonance. And that resonance now, if you look at it from a resonant point of view, if one person comes in at this level of presence and the other person is here, and they say with each other, they begin to balance out, they actually connect. And we know that's actually true. That's been proven scientifically that if we can get the two-person to get into a heart coherence, they will go to an experience of feeling validated. Questions on that one? Comments?
Well, interesting that I I understand intimacy as the connection, and what came to me is sometimes with the girlfriends when we get into that laughter and just is that kind of when it just feels like we're all just the belly laughs and it's all togetherness kind of. Is that also part of the intimate edge?
Sure, because at that point at the intimate edge, especially from a point of view, I understand it. It's this, there every once in a while we have this variety of people called various name laugh fests and everything else, and you think back about it, there was nothing about it. What made it giddy was all three of you were present, and one of you had happy in your heart, for lack of a better phrase. They felt it throughout your whole being, and it softened them. And then suddenly, excuse me, a release of energy began to happen because laughter is one of the clearest and easiest ways to just release complete tension from the body. And so, if I'm fully engaged, I feel safe enough to laugh and us to be tease and be silly. That's an engaged form of listening and being. It's a type of presence. I'll give you an example. Most people were told not to do that. It's from the day they were born. To get too silly, to get giddy, to experience the laughter. I know I was. Be quiet. So,
Well, conversely, would that also be true in sorrow? Sometimes in in those moments of pure sadness and loss or something that I can connect up more with somebody, interesting enough.
well, empathy can do that because we're relating through our own sense of prior experiences that expands to the heart, that forms compassion for the other while maintaining a clear boundary of ourself. Now, for me though, the issue is if we're going to stay present, we have to be empathetic. If I go into sympathy, now it's about me because I'm feeling sorry for you. So it's my sorrow. It's not yours. I'm feeling sorry for you. So when we often say this in our process to different people is, my sincere sympathies. I understand that. That's fine. But in saying that, what we're actually saying is I understand not exactly your pain, but in my own pain, I understand yours. So I'm offering you sympathies. That's one thing. But when we join them, cross the boundary into their sorrow and become part of their sorrow, then we have fused and we have lost our own presence. And so I can be very supportive and empathetic with people and various losses without fusing. Because the fusing does no good, and it doesn't support them either. So if I have somebody who's understanding and willing to listen to me, I give a good example of this. I've sat with this. I've sat with a lot of people through hospice. They had cancer, and the thing that is frequently said is I don't need you to feel sorry for me. I just need you to sit with me.
I hear the difference because if I'm sitting there and I'm giving it good or bad or whatever is happening for them, just that has judgment, which is not working then. But just being with them and just hearing, see the difference.
So I'm just sitting, and oftentimes they don't want us to feel sorry because you can't make it better. If you have cancer, you're not going to make me feel better. But if you sit with me and just be with me and appreciate me just for who I am and where I'm at, there's comfort in that, and that's presence. And I can listen to you and be with you. And so that's one of the most powerful things I've sat with people in their dying days or dying hours. It's just being with them. And frequently, one example of just sitting there, um, doing the dance of going back and forth. She would open her eyes, look to see if I'm still here. I'm just sitting there holding her hand. She'd have a smile, and then she would go back before she passed. I'm not going to sit there and beg her not to leave. That's about me. So listening is the same way as when you do empathic or engaged listening, you're listening with your whole body. It's not just your mind. You're sitting right at that intimate edge. So the last one is called coherent or generative listening. It's not a whole lot different than empathic or engaged listening, but it becomes a dance between energetic connections where presence balances vulnerability. And it's an interesting place because you're literally fully into the intimate edge. So the way I like to describe this, and sometimes I'm not sure this helps, but it's a place where courage and compassion unite in two individuals at an edge. So that means we both have enough courage just to be at that very vulnerable place with each other. But for some reason, instead of feeling exposed, our heart opens. We feel connected. And in spiritual terms, a spiritual understanding, it's what ends up happening is that feeling of oneness. Oftentimes it's momentary, but it's life-changing. It's like I feel touched by your soul and vice versa. And it's often very difficult to even describe, but I like to call it coherent, but some do call it generative. I think it's the same. Coherent is mean as we just touch heart to heart, if you prefer, or soul to soul. And it's a very rare process. But when we do experience that, the shift in the two people is we know something just happened and we don't have words for it. And even more, the knowing is we don't need words. That makes sense.
Yes.
Another way of describing this is a heart coherence, and it forms an intimate resonance with each other. So we use phrase like in sync. Some people find that at a little bit lower frequency, the way I would phrase it, in the sense that they can answer each other's sentences and all of those things. But that's resonance. And so when we have that, the impact of it is we literally at the deepest level of ourself, of our being, we feel seen and heard, and it happens simultaneously for both people. So at this point, then listening becomes generative, where the higher connection begins to impact each other's life, and oftentimes creates a binding relationship. One of my friends from college is that way. We don't have to talk for years. But the minute we start talking, it's like we haven't been apart. I'm sure we'd all like to have more of those. But I've learned that I'm quite happy the fact that I have one or two or three, several. Actually, I have about 4 or 5 people I can say that way. So, any comments or questions at this point, Lisa?
No, I think that was a really good go through on the different levels.
Right. All right, folks. Well, we're going to close for the day. If you haven't, subscribe to the podcast. And I like to say pay it forward by referring it out to your friends and family. Those of you who are aware, I've written a series of novels. So the Thoughts series has 9 published books, 6 more manuscripts are in process. So you can get audio, digital, or print, which is a story about your own spiritual development and individuals, which I think you'll relate to. And with that, I thank Lisa for stepping in for Sadeo. And we'll close out Natural Passages, revealing the unmarked doors of life. Thank you much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Herb.